will probably be. Perfect. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our info session, where you will get to know the Map of Adaptation Actions by the Canadian Centre for Climate Services and the new CLIMAtlantic Networking Map by CLIMAtlantic. So CLIMAtlantic works throughout Atlantic Canada, all of which is part of the unceded and traditional territories of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqey, Passamaquoddy, Innu, and Inuit peoples. I am personally located in Abegweit. That's the name used by the Mi'kmaq Nation to refer to Prince Edward Island. And this is often translated as cradled on the waves. So if you have any questions throughout this info session, you can write them in the chat, because the chat will be monitored throughout the session and questions will be answered during the Q&A time at the end of the session. So this info session is a partnership between the Canadian Centre for Climate Services and CLIMAtlantic. Established in 2018, the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, or CCCS, at Environment and Climate Change Canada provides information and support to those seeking to understand and reduce their vulnerability to climate change. The CCCS leads a Government of Canada-wide approach to provide credible, useful, and timely climate data, information, and tools for Canadians to consider climate change in their decisions. The CCCS also works with a network of regional climate organizations to provide the localized services that Canadians need for their particular context, and this network includes CLIMAtlantic. So CLIMAtlantic facilitates access to regionally relevant climate information and supports its effective use in planning and decision-making for New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. CLIMAtlantic is user-driven, focusing on the needs of Indigenous communities, academia, provincial governments, municipalities, local service districts, nonprofits, industry, and landowners. CLIMAtlantic works with all regional and local groups to ensure there is a strong network of collaboration and data and tools are easily accessible. CLIMAtlantic was created in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Climate Services and Atlantic Canada's provincial governments, and the support from the Ecology Action Centre, New Brunswick Environmental Network, and Astor Group. So in today's session, we will raise awareness of the features, functionality, and new enhancements of the Map of Adaptation Actions. We will then move on to CLIMAtlantic's new tool, the Networking Map, exploring its features and functionality. And throughout the session, regional actions will be highlighted, and we will show users how to contribute to both tools. And now I will pass it over to Taz for some polling questions for our audience.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. So as mentioned, my name is Tasman or Taz. Before I begin, I would just like to take a moment to mention that Casey and I are living and working in Ottawa, and therefore are living and working on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. So before we jump in, we have a few questions to help us understand who is here with us in our virtual audience today. To facilitate this, we are going to use the polling feature in Zoom. So as the questions pop up on the screen, please indicate which of the multiple choice answers best describes you. If the polling feature is not working for you, please feel free to put your answers directly into the chat. I want to make it clear that all of your responses will be anonymous and your name will not be associated with your responses, so you will not be able to see who is participating on screen. And with that, let's jump into it. So question 1, where are you attending from today? Ooh, some good responses. I'm seeing Nova Scotia, New Brunswick's taking the lead here. Oh, a couple outside of Atlantic Canada. A few from PEI. New Brunswick's back in the lead today. Awesome. So it seems like we've got a pretty good spread going on. A number of folks from different areas. Love to see that. Give it a few more seconds here. Alrighty. And maybe with that, we will move on to our second question. So where do you work? Within NGO or nonprofit, Indigenous government, Indigenous community, municipality, provincial government, private sector, or other? Oh, so I'm seeing quite a few NGO nonprofits. We've got Indigenous community, provincial government, quite a few falling into that other category, some private sector. Maybe just give it another moment. Alrighty. And we'll move on to the final question. So how familiar are you with the Map of Adaptation Actions? Are you very familiar, somewhat familiar, or not at all familiar? Ooh, okay, we're seeing quite a few fall into that somewhat or not at all category, which is awesome. A great learning opportunity here today. Just give it another moment or so. Those last sort of trickling in. All right, and I think with that, we will conclude the polling portion of this presentation. Perfect. So thank you so much to everyone who participated in that activity. We greatly appreciate you giving us that insight into who we have with us here today. So I would now like to turn our attention to the Map of Adaptation Actions. The map is hosted on the Canada in a Changing Climate website, where you can also find the Atlantic chapter, which is part of the National Assessment Series, Canada in a Changing Climate, Advancing Our Knowledge for Action. The link in the chat will take you directly to the map if you would like to explore or follow along throughout our presentation today. So in very basic terms, we like to think of the map as a one-stop shop where visitors can easily explore examples of adaptation actions and find links to additional resources, including climatedata.ca, the Climate Action Map, and other sources of case studies and climate information. Users of the map will be able to search for hundreds of climate change adaptation examples in an interactive and user-friendly fashion, refining their queries through the use of filters and keyword searches. The map increases access to critical information and provides peer-to-peer learning opportunities. So with that, I will hand things over to Casey, who will take you on an in-depth tour of the map's functionalities and features.
Awesome. Thanks, Taz. So hi, everyone. My name is Casey. I am also with the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. Thanks for introducing the map. I am going to now take you through a demonstration. So I will just switch over to my browser here. Hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, and so I'm going to walk through the map today. So as Taz mentioned, the map is housed on changingclimate.ca, which you may already be familiar with as the home of the Canada in a Changing Climate Report series. And another thing about the map is that it can all be accessed in English and French. So just wanted to draw your attention to that at the top here. Before we dive into the actual map itself, I wanted to speak to some of the content that you can see that's available at the top here. You'll note a number of different tabs that have a bunch of different information that's hopefully helpful to users. So the first is the About tab, which is relatively self-explanatory. It gives you a little bit more information about the map itself, the map's purpose, a bit of the background, how it came to be, who worked on the development of the map, and that type of thing. The next is the contact us page, again, relatively self-explanatory, but this just gives users a chance to get in touch with us. So you can reach out to us for whatever it may be that you need, whether it be a question about how to use the map, if you have feedback on the map or feedback on specific examples that are on the map. You can also use the contact us tab to submit an example for inclusion on the map. And so I will speak to this a little bit more in depth at the end of the demo. But yeah, so you can reach out to us for a number of different things. The next tab at the top here is the frequently asked questions tab. And so I'll mention that the map team here at CCCS undertook a number of enhancements to the map recently that have been launched in the fall, and adding this frequently asked questions tab here is one of those. So here we have a list of questions that we often receive in regards to the map, where you can find answers to those questions. And one thing I just wanted to draw attention to is the last question here: where can I find additional information on climate change impacts, data, and adaptation? So here we provide a little bit of a list of additional resources, as we know users visiting this site are likely thinking about adaptation, thinking about climate change, and maybe looking for additional information. So we're trying to be as helpful as possible here by providing these links. And I'll just note that we have a link here at the bottom to CLIMAtlantic. So the last tab that I want to speak to is the More Examples tab. And this is, again, part of the recent enhancements that we've undertaken to make the map a little bit more usable and helpful for our users. So the More Examples page, it provides a list of additional tools that exist in Canada that provide similar information to the Map of Adaptation Actions. So we recognize that our map cannot be completely exhaustive of all the adaptation action and adaptation work that's happening in Canada, and we know that many others offer similar information. So we wanted to create this list in the hopes of being as useful as possible and helping our users find exactly what it is that they're looking for. So this list includes a number of different tools that have specific focuses. So for example, that focus on adaptation within specific sectors, or adaptation to specific climate impacts, for example. And as a recent addition to this list, we've added the CLIMAtlantic Networking Map, which Cassandra will speak to following the demonstration of this map. So with that, I will take us back to the map itself, and we can dive into the actual map. So if you scroll down from there, you can see this is what the map currently looks like. So for those of you who are new, this is all you know, but for those of you who have visited the map before, you'll notice that there is a big change here, and that is the map view itself. So as part of the enhancements that we've made, one was to create a satellite view of the map. In the past, we had a little outline of Canada with an outline of the provinces and territories, but we found that it was a little bit difficult for users to navigate if you weren't super familiar with the specific area that you were looking at. So the satellite view offers topographical features as well as place names to help sort of situate the examples within Canada. The functionality of the map, however, remains more or less the same as it was before. So you can see there's a number of markers on the map. So these indicate examples. You can hover over these markers and it will give you a title of the examples. You can also select the markers and it will show you a summary box. And this gives you a snapshot of some of the information that's contained within that example. And it also gives you a link to go into the example page themselves and learn a little bit more about each example. So before I dive into that, I want to speak a little bit about the search functionality. So there's a couple of options for finding examples. As you can see, there are quite a few on the map currently. So if you have specific interests, specific needs, you can use our search functionality to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. So we have the keyword search, which full disclosure, as a result of some of the enhancements that we've been undertaking, it is currently not working, but we are actively trying to fix that. So hopefully the next time you check out the map, that will be working for you. But essentially, when that is functional, you'll be able to type in a keyword of whatever it is that you're looking for, and hopefully you will get results as a result of that search function. But in the meantime, we also have filters that are available. And so depending on what it is that you're interested in searching for, if it is erosion, for example, you can use the filters to find different examples. So for example, if I want erosion case studies, I can look under climate issue and select that, and it will filter the examples for me to show only those that are tagged with erosion. And another feature of the filters is that they are cumulative. So if I am only interested in erosion case studies that exist on the East Coast, I can select Atlantic under type of setting, and it will filter accordingly. And one of the last things I wanted to highlight that we've recently updated on the map as a result of our recent enhancements is that when you select filters, you can now generate custom URLs. So if you are working with colleagues who might be interested in the same kind of filter categories, they're looking for erosion case studies on the East Coast, you can copy this link and share that with them, and it will open for them with these filters pre-selected. So I will now dive into individual examples themselves. So again, when manually navigating the map, you can pan around like you used to be able to, and you can zoom in and out, which is really helpful for the areas that have a little bit more concentration of examples. So let's say you are interested in this example here, protecting and restoring PEI's coastline. You can use the summary box to get a sense of what might be going on in this example. It gives you a little bit of an indication of the timeline, so 2021, relatively recent. And say you are interested in that, you would select View Details, and that will take you to the example page. In terms of making sure my internet worked, I had the page preloaded here, so hopefully that will show up in a second. Perfect. So this is where it will bring you. And example pages are all the same, so they will all look generally like this, obviously with unique information for each example. But you'll start with your summary information at the top here. So you've got a short description, and this will give you a brief snapshot of the example. So it will provide things like the main climate issue, the sector of interest, the setting, and things like that, just to give you a sense of what the example is about. You can also see this box on the right-hand side here. And so this is all the different filter categories, and it will show you exactly which tags under those categories this example is tagged with. And then finally, we list a lead of the example at the bottom of this box here for each example. So if you read this and you decide you're interested in learning more about this example, you can scroll down to get more in-depth information. And so I just wanted to note that the headers here are actually consistent across all examples for the most part. So in the hopes of providing some consistency in the layout of the information across examples, we looked to have consistent headers that actually follow the adaptation planning cycle. So the understanding and assessing impact section, this is where you'll get some details about the problem or the issue, especially it's linked to climate. So specific impacts that were being experienced, or risks or vulnerabilities, and how the actors or the example leads went about understanding those problems or those impacts. So things that could be contained here are, for example, the type of data or information that was used to undertake an impact assessment. Obviously, it will be unique for each example, but that's kind of a general sense of the type of information that will be contained in this section. Next, there is the identifying action section. So this is intended to detail the kind of planning phase, specifically how it relates to addressing the impacts that were identified in the earlier section and the approach to that. So things that could be contained here are the broad strokes of the action plan, such as timelines or key actions that were identified, whether specific guidelines or tools or frameworks were employed to create that plan, and perhaps actors or specific services that were used as well. Next, there is the implementation section. So this is intended to detail the implementation of actions that were identified in the planning phase and the approach to implementation. So things like broad strokes of any implementation plans, main actions, timelines, things like that. And then we have outcomes and monitoring progress. And I'll just take a side note to say that we understand that obviously not all adaptation actions are quite at this phase yet. Many are still in the implementation phase or still in the identifying actions phase, and that's perfectly okay. We have those examples on the map as well. In those cases, we just would not fill out information for this specific section, but it leaves a bit of room in the future for when those actions are implemented and the outcomes and monitoring progress phases have been reached, we can always go back and we can update those examples to make sure that they have that information. So the outcomes and monitoring progress section, where it does exist, will detail obviously the outcomes of the implemented actions. So we try to highlight things like lessons learned or co-benefits wherever we have that information for specific examples here. Next, we have the next steps. So this is relatively self-explanatory, but wherever next steps are identified, we try to highlight those here. So whether there are next actions identified, if there are improvements or adjustments that need to be made, that kind of thing will be included in this section. And then we have the resources section. So we try to include this for every example that we have on the map. And this is where we link to, so you can see link to full case study here. So if this example was based on a specific document, we'll link to that document there so you can read the full example. However, some are based on interviews and don't necessarily have that base document. So in that case, there wouldn't be a link there, but we do try to provide additional resources for each. So for example, the Prince Edward Island climate change risk assessment was referenced in this example. So we link to that here in case that is useful for anyone else who's looking to undertake similar work. We also have a link to climatedata.ca, as that is one of the sources of climate information that was used for this specific example. So these are unique to each case study. So that wraps up the demo, and I'm just going to jump back into the PowerPoint for a second here to talk a little bit more about how you can submit examples to the map. And so there are a few slides here for your reference that I'll just note quickly. This speaks to the outline of the example pages that you can refer back to if you're interested in learning more about the types of information in each section. So as I mentioned, you can submit your own examples for inclusion on the map. And so I'm just going to speak briefly to that process. So as I showed in the demo, there are a couple of ways of getting in touch with us and letting us know. You are welcome to use the contact us form that exists on the map, or you can send us an email directly to the email on the screen here. They'll both come right to us, so whatever your preference is okay with us. So usually the process for developing content is individual to each specific example. So if you reach out and let us know that you have an example that you'd like to develop, we can have a bit of a conversation as to how we can actually approach that development. So for example, if you prefer to have our team develop the content, you can share any documentation that might exist on the example, or give us an interview to gather all the information that we might need, and we can draft the content and share that with you for review and approval, and then work towards getting that uploaded on the map. However, if you prefer to be more hands-on, we can share our template with you and you can draft the content for the map, and then we can work together after the fact to make sure that all the content fits within the template and meets the needs of the map, and then we can work towards uploading the content that way. So it really is flexible, and it's a conversation, and we're happy to work with you and meet you wherever your needs may be or what your capacity may be. So moral of the story is, if you have examples that you think should be included on the map and you think would fit well on the map, please do reach out to us. We'd be happy to have a conversation about getting those added. So I think that brings my portion to an end, and I will pass it off to Cassandra.
Thank you so much, Casey. I think that I'm screen sharing and you can see my slides now. Perfect. Okay, so on behalf of CLIMAtlantic, I would like to introduce everyone to the new CLIMAtlantic Networking Map. So this project was initiated because there is a need to connect Atlantic Canadians with climate data and climate adaptation information. CLIMAtlantic receives many service requests through our help desk from individuals and organizations looking for this information, and we have helped connect hundreds of Atlantic Canadians with the right networks so we can all increase resilience and effectively respond to our changing climate. But how can we be more efficient with connecting Atlantic Canadians with the right networks? So the CLIMAtlantic Networking Map provides an interactive experience that allows users to easily search, find, and connect with individuals and organizations working on climate adaptation in Atlantic Canada. So before we explore the map, I want to highlight its features and how they function. So both individuals and organizations appear as pins on the map. You can filter these by keywords, locations, and sectors. So keywords represent the adaptation work that the individual or organization is involved in. Location represents the geographic area that the individual or organization works and functions throughout. And sector defines the type of work an individual or organization is involved in. The colors of the pins represent the geographic location that an organization functions in or an individual works in. The icon on the pins represents the sector an organization functions in or an individual works in. So, for example, the yellow pin with a leaf icon represents an Indigenous community or organization that functions locally. And locally, as defined for the CLIMAtlantic Networking Map, refers to an area smaller than a province, which could be a municipality, a county, or a town, for example. The blue pin with a heart icon represents an NGO that functions province-wide. And the green pin with a briefcase icon represents a business or industry that functions throughout Atlantic Canada or the Maritimes. And the legend for the pins is located above the map on the website for you to easily refer back to. So now we will get into the demonstration of the networking map. So I will go to the web page. Okay, so the networking map is available on the CLIMAtlantic website right now. From the homepage, you will find the networking map along the top, but it is worth mentioning that as CLIMAtlantic launches more tools, there will be a drop-down menu here labeled tools, and then that is where you will find the networking map along with other tools that CLIMAtlantic launches. So keep an eye out for those. So the networking map, strengthening Atlantic Canada's ability to respond and adapt to a changing climate. So you can use this map to find and connect with individuals and organizations working on climate adaptation. So there is a short description of how to use the map and an option to skip down to the form using the Add My Pin button. The legend for the pin is fixed above the map, so you can easily refer back to it. So here's the map. It's supported by Google Maps. So if you're familiar with that, then this map functions in a similar way. You can use the plus or minus buttons to zoom in and zoom out, and they will zoom in and out on the center point of your map. But you can also use the control button on your keyboard and use the scroll on your mouse to zoom in and out. And it will scroll in and out on the point where your cursor is. So when it comes to highly populated areas, such as cities, and in this example, we'll zoom into Fredericton, you'll need to zoom in quite a lot to see the extent of all the pins, since some organizations and individuals may work in the same building, for example. So we try to space it out so you can see, but there will be overlap when you're not zoomed in close enough. And you can also pan around by right-clicking and dragging around the map. So let's zoom back out to see all of Atlantic Canada. Okay, so in the top left corner of the map is the button filter. So when you click on that, you will see keywords, locations, and sectors. So let's go through an example here. Let's say we are looking for an individual or an organization who does adaptation work in agriculture and food security. So we can click on keywords and we can select out of the different keywords, agriculture and food security. And we can hit apply filters and and we can see on the map everyone that has selected the keyword agriculture and food security. But let's say we want to find only those in PEI. So let's add the filter from the drop-down list location, Prince Edward Island. And we can hit apply filters. So those only show in PEI. We can use Control Zoom to bring ourselves in closer. But let's say we only want to reach out to NGOs in PEI that have selected agriculture and food security as a keyword and work throughout the province of PEI. So we can go down to sectors and apply filters. Sectors and NGOs and apply filters. So we have 4 pins on the map that represent NGOs and PEI that have selected agriculture and food security as a keyword. So when you click on one of the pins, a panel will appear on the right side with some basic information of that individual or organization. So it will have their name, their sector, location, a brief description of the adaptation work that they do, the keywords that they have selected that represents the work that they are doing, as well as their contact details. Their email, potentially a phone number could be listed here, as well as links to their social media, which includes Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, their website, and the ability to quickly email them as well. So you can unclick a filter by simply clicking it, changing it from blue to white, and you can apply filters again. The other ones will reappear, but you can also just reset all filters by hitting reset filters. Okay, so we also have a different view of this map. We have the list view. So you can toggle this over from list map view to list view. There are 4 columns of information for each individual and organization on the map. So the columns are name, location, sector, and keywords. So the name, you can switch alphabetical order. You can do the same thing with location, which is helpful if you want to group them by location, and the same goes for sector. You can group them that way as well. And using the same the same example we used on the map, we can use this search bar function. So let's say we are searching for agriculture in Prince Edward Island, and we are looking for an NGO. The search bar does not like commas, it just likes the actual word in the spaces, so keep that in mind. So as you'll see, it says showing 1 to 4 of 4 entries, the same as we had on the map. So that's a alternative for you to see multiple keywords at once. And the same idea, you can click on any of these and the same side panel will appear. Okay. So how do we add a pin on the map? So again, this will jump you right down to below the map, or you can just scroll down. And here you will find an add your pin by completing this form. You can fill out this form for yourself or on behalf of an organization. So I will fill out the form so we can see how long it takes. Okay. For myself, what is your name? This should be pretty quick because all my information is already in here. Which pronouns do you use? Do you identify with any of these groups? If you don't identify with these groups, but you do identify with the group that is not listed, you can select other, and then you can type it out for it to be displayed. Email is required, and you check this box if you would like it displayed on your information panel. Website link, the phone number only if you want it listed for people to connect with you by phone, and which sector are you a part of? So I work for CLIMAtlantic, which is an NGO, but if you represent more than one sector and would like to showcase them separately on the map, you may submit another form. My job title, who you work for, and the keywords that represents the work you're doing. And these keywords, as we saw on the map, will help people find you. So I'll just choose a few here. And then the type of climate adaptation work you do. Max 2,000 characters. You can just have a sentence. It's however much information you want to share, because it will link to your website and different social media channels as well. The geographic location your work covers. So CLIMAtlantic is Atlantic Canada, and where you would want your pin displayed on your map. So you could put the exact address, such as if you have a organization address, but if you're just completing it for yourself, and let's say you work from home and you don't want your home address on the map, you can just put in the first four digits of your postal code. And then you can, but do not have to, add in your social media. And at the bottom, click this box if you want to subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already. So once you've completed that form, we can hit submit. And it may take 2 to 3 business days for your pin to appear on the map, but you will not receive an email confirmation when it appears. So remember to check back. If you need to make changes to your pin or delete your pin, you will need to email communications@climatlantic.ca. And you can also use this email to reach out with any questions that you might have about the map. And here is what the panel looks like based on the information that I entered. Yours won't appear this fast. It needs to be translated, but I already had put this on the map for you to see. So just basic information, my description, my keywords I entered, and my contact details. So with that overview, I will turn it over to Val, and I will stop screen sharing, and we can head into the question and answer period.
Thanks, Cassandra. Hello, everyone. So my name is Valerie Cote. I am a member of the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. I am situated on the traditional and unceded territories of the Huron-Wendat people, also known as the Quebec City region. So I'll be kind of animating, if you will, the question, comment, feedback, discussion period. I think we can easily use the next 12 minutes. So I would like to suggest that we start with any questions from the floor. I did take note of a few in the chat that I will be going to in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to give people a chance to provide either feedback, comments, and questions at this stage. I see one from Ginny.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Very interesting resource. We actually, at the Gaia project, we have a program we call the Green Experts. And we reach out to potential partners to become green experts that help at different levels students in our program. So they could be on a panel around the topic, or they could help for a classroom project directly in the classroom, or they could even become a mentor for a student. And we use a map similar to that. But I was wondering, my question is, what are you using? Is that in-house coding, or do you use a plugin of some sort?
Yeah, so it's a mix of things. I'm happy to address that question. I guess I'm assuming you're speaking to the Map of Adaptation Actions or the networking map.
I'm looking at the CLIMAtlantic, the last one that you guys shared.
Okay.
So with that little popover information, yes, it looks similar to what we have, and we use Map SVG plugin. So I'm wondering what you guys use.
Okay, so Cassandra, I'm actually going to turn that question to you, considering this has to do with the CLIMAtlantic map.
Yes, thank you, Val. We work with a web designer to produce this. So I would love for you to send me those questions via email, or I can connect you with the web designer we are working with to talk more about the inner workings of that.
Yeah, I like the feature where you don't have to enter the information yourself, which is what we are doing right now with Map SVG. So that's very good. Yeah.
And that was something that we wanted to work around. We did not want to do that because we're expecting so many pins on the map.
Perfect. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay, I'll turn to the questions in the chat, but don't hesitate to put your hand up if ever you do want to. Oh, I see Sherry's hand just went up. How about we, Sherry, your turn.
Hi, yeah, I'm actually just really quickly thanking you for doing this. And also we have a riparian map portal that we are using for, I think it's for staging some of our projects, and it works on a similar kind of format. We use our filters just as you do. It was hard to see some of the background that you can put in. So I'm just working on like a couple different portals, but have you heard of the riparian web portal?
Not for myself. I don't, Casey and
Okay.
Tess from the CCS, I'm not sure, eh? No, I would say no.
Okay, all right, well, this actually lends itself really well to trying to get stakeholders involved in a project so they can see exactly what you're doing. So it's very similar. And it uses just our GPS and then parameters around exactly what each project or initiative would be undertaking. And the question I had is, ours is based on rivers and the LiDAR that's available for rivers, and yours is basically based on a place on a map or a pin. Is there any way, you know, you could look at, for example, some of the terrain? So essentially that's what it is, the riparian terrain. Are there any other key factors that you could possibly add to your filters? And I guess that's my biggest question. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. So I think for now, at least, the Map of Adaptation Actions functions with, yes, a pin. It is a Google satellite view, so it's nothing too complex. We have been talking for a while now with our web developers to see if we can add different layers of data to the same map. And similarly, I did see a question in the chat relating to whether it would be possible to have kind of geographical references that go beyond just a point and actually covers a region. So I guess my answer is the same for both of these questions. For now, it's not possible, but we had long conversations with our web developers to see if that would be something we could do in the future, because we see a lot of value in doing that. So Sherry, for the moment, it's point-based, if you will, and perhaps moving forward, there could be a way to explore topography and adding maybe, you know, a whole separate layer on different geographic characteristics that could help users navigate across examples. But how about maybe, I don't know if you saw the comment in the chat. Oh, I did see, okay, so you added the link of your platform. So we'll have a look at that, Sherry, and just have a better sense of what it is that your tool does, for sure. All right, well, in terms of the chat questions, so for the Map of Adaptation Actions, I did see a question relating to the location marker and whether it could cover a particular region. So as I mentioned, we're working on that. We do have, so for now, our default, I guess, is to put the pin in the capital of whatever province or whatever territory, if it covers more. We have a few examples that are pinned in multiple locations for one example, if it's kind of, if it was important for the project leads to have that articulated in that way. We also have a national box, if you will. So we do have some examples that actually have a national scope or national coverage. So we've kind of categorized those examples within that box. So we're finding kind of loopholes, if you will, to make that reflection on the map, but we're trying to find better solutions for our next round of enhancements, if you will. I also had a question sent to me where they were wondering whether or not we're using a content template or if we're using some sort of mock-up to develop the content. So the answer is yes, as Casey mentioned. Our content is organized in a very similar fashion across examples, but we are very flexible in the template, I guess. So we've identified what we would like to communicate on the map and what we've heard from users is useful to communicate. But obviously that depends on the project, that depends on the example, it depends on the information that is available, so on and so forth. So we have a typical content template that we often play around with depending on the example. And one other great question that was put in the chat is whether or not there's a difference between the red and the blue points on the map. And yes, there is. So I'm happy someone asked that question. So the red points are examples from the National Assessment Reports that are released from the Natural Resources Canada. So those are essentially links to the different reports and links to different sections of those reports. And then the blue, I guess, points are from examples from many, many different sources. Federal, provincial, NGOs, communities, municipalities, private sector, so on and so forth. So that's kind of what is making the difference, what it explains the difference between both points. Cassandra, we did get a question specific to your map, to the networking map. So the question was, is it possible to edit the information for your PIN after you've submitted your information?
So the PIN and the information of yours can be edited, but you're unable to go into the map and do it yourself. What you would have to do is email communications@climatlantic.ca. You can just write in that email the edit you had in mind, if it's for, and what PIN it's for, the name of it. So whether that's your name or the organization name. And then we'll go in the back end and edit that for you.
And maybe I'll just leverage a bit of Cassandra's response to say that if ever you notice anything on the map of adaptation actions that is inaccurate or outdated, you can definitely connect with us via our inbox. We are at the CCS trying to have a bit like a proactive role in that sense. So we want to connect with those who contributed to the map to make sure that, you know, to ask whether or not there has been new actions, new steps in the adaptation planning process. So we're always trying to keep, I guess, the content as much relevant as possible. But having said that, it's a long process. So if ever you do come across anything on the map that is outdated or wrong, let us know and we'll make the adjustments necessary. I think I'll give another maybe a few seconds for anyone else to ask any questions or to provide any feedback, and then we'll conclude our session for today. Okay, all right. Well, Taz, if you can close everything up for us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Val, and thank you so much to everybody for those fantastic questions. So this concludes our session. Once again, I would like to thank CLIMAtlantic for this opportunity. As a reminder, we encourage you to add your own submissions to both the Map of Adaptation Actions and to the CLIMAtlantic Networking Map. If you have any feedback, questions, or submissions for us at the Map of Adaptation Actions team, please do not hesitate to contact us using the email address in the chat. We would be more than happy to discuss with you. Finally, we would like to mention that we will be hosting a focus group session this winter with the intention of gathering user needs and exploring in-depth feedback on the Map of Adaptation Actions. So if you're interested in joining that session, please contact us directly. We will also send out a note a little bit closer to the time of the session, just as a gentle reminder, but just wanted to give that heads up. And with this, I would like to thank you all again, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
And I just saw one last comment in the chat. The recording will be made available to everyone, and CLIMAtlantic will be integrating that to their website. So go to CLIMAtlantic's website for the recording and other information.
Thanks.